what was the impetus for you to join all of these different committees? Were you looking to increase your own salary? Were you just curious and just wanted to be more involved? Or was it a stepping stone to maybe something greater, like being a part of your own company or starting your own company?
That's a great question. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that question. In playing it back, I think I was just frustrated because if you get through medical school, residency, fellowship, and study for 3 boards, and you kind of keep thinking that it's going to continue, and then you realize, oh, that's it. And I think when someone's been on this constant path of growth and the next thing, I just think I wasn't ready to say there's no more next thing. I didn't know what the next thing was, but I knew I had to explore my growth. Once you're seeing 20 patients a day and you got that routine down, you're like, okay, so I do this for the next 30, 40 years and that's it. So it just seemed like the program of growth shouldn't stop. And I think I just initially did it because I knew nothing about administrative medicine side. And some of the jobs I took, I didn't like. I realized what I didn't like. And some of the jobs I took, I really liked. And you weren't going to figure that out until you tried it. I've been essentially employed as a hospital administrator and gotten paid by a hospital. I've been employed by, an insurance company and gotten paid from an insurance company. The teaching was voluntary clinical staff, but I got to teach in a medical school and teach second-year medical students and third and fourth-year medical students. So all of that helped you understand where you wanted to go. I think it's easy to say you would wind up where you wind up anyway without those experiences. I might argue that those experiences help shape your future decisions, if that makes sense. I don't know if you're familiar with this thing called the Peter Principle, which is that, people get promoted to their, I don't know the exact phrase, but people get promoted to their level of incompetence. Yeah. Just because you're a good engineer doesn't mean you would be good as the head of the engineering department, right? And people say, well, he's a good engineer, so he would be a great head of the engineering department. He's a good accountant, so he would be great at being the head of the accounting department. Now, you could be, but you need to acquire some skills. And I think this is the trade-off where people say, well, it was my idea, I put the money in, so obviously I'd be the best person to lead it. Now, that sounds depressing, but if you then say, okay, now how do I acquire those skills? Who do I need to? Are there mentors, people I can look to who can advise me, walk me through it, hold my hands? But if you view leadership as soft skills, you'll never look for that or ask for help.
So tell me I know there's a lot of mistakes, but what's the number one mistake that CEOs typically make when running a business?
Yeah, I think the number one mistake is they think if they have the right business, by definition, it will succeed. Get the right product, get the right service, it's the right thing. But the actual execution, the hiring, the enrolling people into your vision, all of that is something you need to learn. And you can either learn it the easy way or the hard way. I think most of us who navigated it made a lot of mistakes, and we figured it out, hopefully. But ideally, it would be best if you didn't figure it out by making mistakes, but just to get the heads up and know ahead of time that there are certain things you have to do to make your business successful. Even if you have a great idea, even if you have a great product, you have to execute.
So a lot of people think that, their $1 billion idea is the make it or break it for them. Why is that not the case?
Well, without the execution, without having a great team, mistakes can be made that can be fatal. I mean, you can die by 1,000 cuts. If you don't have your systems in place,
what kind of systems?
Well, first of all, you got to look. What depends if you're a service or if you're a product. But first of all, you have to identify initially 3, 4, 5 people who are enrolled in your vision, who don't feel it's a job that they're going to, like go to the moon with you kind of
Right.
thing. And
I mean, how do you find those people though? Because I mean, there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that they struggle to find those people, especially in the new way the world works digitally.
Right, exactly. Well, that's a whole separate question about hiring and mentoring and enrolling people in your vision.
Okay.
But those are all skill sets you need to acquire. But I think the biggest mistake you could make is just assume that your great idea will work without you identifying key leaders in your organization, because you can't do everything. LeBron James single-handedly cannot win the championship.
He needs a whole team.
He needs a team, and so I think that's the most common. But we have more. But I think those are some of the more common ones.
We call ourselves E7,
Mm-hmm.
and the E stands for, of course, the technology. The 7 is really 7 books of business, and travel medicine is now one of the 7. So, let's just say that makes up 20% of our business. So
Right.
the other 20%. So we went into every book of business that vaccines were involved. So for example, there's vaccines involved in employee health. There's vaccines involved in student health. There's vaccines involved in sexually transmitted diseases. So we're in that business because there's vaccines involved. So if vaccine, the way I kind of look at it is, imagine you have a refrigerator full of vaccines for a travel medicine clinic, but you don't use it for anything but travel medicine. And the analogy I give is, if you wanted to open up a tire shop, right? And you had an inventory of all the tires, in the United States. I mean, every single tire you could imagine. But you only decided to only sell tires to Chevrolets. That wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. So if we're going to have a vaccine full of a refrigerator full of vaccines, we're not just going to do travel. And that was the original idea. We're not going to do just travel medicine. We're going to do employee health, student health. We're going to do STD, COVID. We're going to do it all. If vaccines are involved, not only are we going to do the vaccine, but we're going to go vertical. So if we're going to give STD vaccines, we're going to do STD testing, and we're going to do STD treatment. So whatever vaccines were involved, just like travel medicine is not all vaccines. It's writing prescriptions, it's food, water, safety, insect precautions, talking about how to stay safe, what have you. So we provide all the services around the vaccines,
Right.
in 7 different books of business.
I think it's a skill set that people think they can just have because, they're smart. But there's literally skill sets that you need to acquire. How to hire people, how to fire people, how to mentor people, how to deal with crisis in the organization. What do you do when your whole system goes down, or when there's major cracks in whatever you're doing? And I think people who start businesses, don't view leadership skills as a specific set of technical skills they need to acquire. They think it's soft skills. I'm good with people, so I'm going to be a good CEO. No, that's not the case. All right. I mean, it's like flying a 747. If you put me on a cockpit at 30,000 feet and say, land a 747, I can't just say, well, I'm a pretty smart guy, I'll figure it out. No, the plane's going to crash. I mean, no amount of your MBA or your law degree or your medical degree is not going to land that plane. You need to acquire very specific skills to land that 747, right? And so same thing with leadership. You can't just get it because you're a nice guy and you know a lot. You have to say, okay, these are skill sets I need to acquire. So I need to find mentors. I need to seek out those skill sets so I can be successful. Because think about it, most people become CEOs of a startup just because it was just their idea, but they're not qualified to be a CEO, or they just had some money to throw at it. But then, which is fine, it's okay to do that. But then go ahead, if you're going to run an organization with dozens and dozens of people, go ahead and acquire those skills, because they'll maximize your chance for success.
Today, we have a bulletproof system that helps us close up to 80% of those inbound calls. Our high converting call class will teach you how to demonstrate your authority quickly without being pushy. We believe that many businesses out there can benefit from this, we promise to help you achieve your revenue goals by converting more of your incoming calls into actual sales. For more information, please visit our website at highconvertingcallclass.com. Stop waiting for the sales to come to you. Put your revenue into your hands.
You don't want to be the smartest guy in every room. That's definitely not the way to go.
Right.
If you want to acquire those skills, you just have to understand. I give this analogy all the time, but if I met Michael Jordan, I wouldn't tell him how I shoot the ball because it doesn't matter, right? I mean, I should just be asking him, well, tell me more. So again, if you're around a Michael Jordan, that's kind of highfalutin, but if you're around someone who knows more than you, I don't think that's the time to give your take on it because they've been doing it for 20 years. I don't know what your take on it means if you're just getting into it. So yeah, I mean, later on, once you get some of those skills, you may have an opinion. But early on, just understand that if you found these mentors or consultants, just shut up and listen. And that doesn't mean every mentor is the right mentor. It doesn't mean every consultant is the right consultant. But if you do feel like you've got the right person, to just be quiet.
Yeah, I think it was an opportunity to understand where the friction is naturally in traditional medicine.
Yeah.
And realize, what's really important in terms of quality, in terms of patient satisfaction. I mean, it's almost like comical if you really think about it. What other industry do you walk in and they give you a clipboard with 30 pages of stuff on it?
Yeah.
That's just like...
It's frustrating for the customer too, right?
But what other industry would get away with that?
Yeah.
I mean, if you were going to go get your hair cut and they gave you a clipboard with 30 pages, you're like...
Yeah.
Or what other industry gets away with, when you call the office, if you want to make an appointment, dial 1.
Yeah.
If you want your medical records, dial 2. And if you want
it's very personal.
And no matter what number you dial, they'll say, and we'll get back to you in 24, 48 hours. So like thinking
that could be done better.
It can be done better. There's something that screams out, better patient experience and quality too. I mean, we're not touching on that, but how do you improve, make sure, errors aren't made, like in a lot of our software development really doesn't translate into anything financial because, we spend money on things that prevent human error.
Sure.
So if you're going to, if a patient has an allergy to something, the option to give them a vaccine that they're allergic to almost doesn't exist because the system won't allow it.
Sure.
And so if you can automate some of that stuff, and get the human error component out. Generally there's not a lot of ROI on that kind of investment per se, of course.
But over time, it has a direct impact. It's easier for your staff, less paper, right?
And safer for the patients. I mean, so that's really, And the one thing I always say is it just turns out coincidentally that great quality medicine is the best business.
I like the word you use, transferable skills. I just think some of my colleagues don't realize how transferable those skills are. And I like the way you put it, because many of the skills I use now, and of course I learn more, but many of the ones I use now, I look back during my clinical days and I'm like, I was actually, where the buck stops with me, anything that happens to the patient, I own. These kind of things is what CEOs of companies do. Everything stops with me. I own everything. I'm responsible, and so I actually think being in healthcare, especially being on the clinical side, prepares you a lot more than you realize. I just think a lot of people just cannot take the leap of faith and, just say, okay, I'm going to get off this train and try something else. Because once you're on that express train, you just think there's no getting off. I'm just going to be seeing patients forever and ever and ever. And there's no other way to do healthcare but see patients. And seeing patients is great, but you can also impact patients other ways. So,
and then the last thing that I think most senior level people now understand about people who work remote. While there is a good 5, 10, 15% that are just kicking butt at home, let's be honest, there's another 80% that are walking the dog, getting a second job, whatever it is. So, I don't have this romantic vision of working at home. Now, yes, if you're a bookkeeper,
I'm sorry to be laughing, but I'm not sorry. To me, that's hysterical. Just the idea that there's somebody who's listening to this right now and going, "Oh my God, is that what's really going on?" My people that I'm paying money to, they're walking the dog, they're getting a second job.
Yeah, but that's the thing. They'll take the 1 or 2 outliers that are killing it at home, who are, because of the freedom, their productivity's gone through the roof. Yes, but then everyone wants to point out to the outlier. You and I have had lunch with people who are working from home, and come on, they tell us like, "Oh, it's been great. I'm spending more time with this, and I picked up this hobby, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing some consulting work on the side." I've had those lunches, and I hear them telling. Those are anecdotes, but I think my anecdotes are supported by the leadership. In a lot of these organizations coming to that realization. And even if the productivity is the same, you still need, the old conversations at the water cooler, metaphorically, like, "Hey, how are we going to deal with this client? I think I've dealt with him before. I think, this is the way you should approach." You take all, how is that a win? I just think, I know I'm such a contrarian, but how is that a win, missing out on those conversations? It can't be, just by definition. So I think we're wrapped up in the romance of this new age. Why didn't we think of this earlier thing? But I think it's probably in a decade from now, it'll be a remnant of COVID, and yes, there will be a handful of people, but I think it will slowly fade away.
Jonathan, how do you spend your time? How have you kind of how do you manage your day-to-day with the work that you are doing? Can you give us a rundown in your day-to-day, so to speak?
Yeah, well, now that we've gotten to the level of maturity in terms of the senior staff, a lot of it is simply having interactions and meetings with my senior staff on different topics and understanding what direction they're going in and the feedback from them. So once you have a strong team in place, you're not actually in the weeds of the operations, the day-to-day operations, but you're more pulled back and talking about changes of direction, services, products, strategies, as opposed to, literally being in the trenches and operationally, how everything is going that day. So I would say, if you do your job well, after a while, you're not involved in day-to-day operations, but in conjunction and in meetings with your senior staff, you talk about more higher level strategies and higher level thinking about how you can grow the business, as opposed to just, what happened today, what's going to happen next Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4 of next year. And if you can be spending most of your day thinking about that, rather than, how many sales did we make today, or what was the revenue from last week, and what things do we need to order. And so the less operations you can be involved in day to day, and the more higher level, I think that gives you a higher rate of return for your time, for your company.